You ought to visit a clinic in the country. Someone who is engaged in such misbehavior cannot be retained at a university hospital. Stephen, the director's son, has long viewed me as a competitor because I am the head of surgery at the university hospital. Now, Stephen is accusing me of wrongdoing in front of Harold, the director. I didn't do anything like that. Harold refused to listen to my protests. Anyway, we have all the evidence. We don't want to make a big deal out of this, so we'll keep it quiet. However, Kyle, you will have to take responsibility. You'll be sent to a rural area. No way, I thought. Harold is protecting Stephen and seems determined to demote me. Stephen grinned wickedly as he watched me panic. Haha, Kyle, you can go plow fields, you filthy quack. And so, I was unjustly transferred from the university hospital to a rural clinic. But at that time, no one knew yet that the people who framed me were going to face a severe reckoning. My name is Kyle Turner. I'm a surgeon working at a university hospital in Tokyo. Ever since I was a child, I was skilled with my hands and had a strong curiosity. To satisfy my thirst for knowledge, I entered the surgical department after graduating from medical school. Following my entry, I followed a senior doctor I respected and gained experience with many different cases. I performed over 50,000 surgeries and am rumored to be a candidate for the next professor. Patients speak highly of me, and thanks to word of mouth, patients are referred to me not just from nearby hospitals, but also from rural areas. As a result, I've been entrusted with the role of head of surgery. Dr. Turner, the patients you operated on have been getting out of bed quickly, which is really surprising. Their discharge times are also fast, so the bed turnover rate is excellent, which really helps us, said Rachel, the head nurse of the surgical ward, smiling as she spoke to me. Thank you. Well, it's always better for patients if they can be discharged sooner, I replied. My surgeries are known for being quick and meticulous. Because the incisions are small, there is little bleeding. Recently, I've been performing many endoscopic surgeries, which further shorten the hospitalization period. As the head of surgery, I have to consider the number of surgeries and bed turnover rates. But in my case, these results naturally improved as I focused on providing less burdensome medical care to patients. In short, my reputation improved unintentionally. However, the one who doesn't like me is Stephen Scott, the director's son. Stephen is the deputy head of surgery and has some decent skills, but having grown up spoiled because he's the director's son, his attitude towards patients and staff is arrogant, and complaints are constant. Dr. Turner, a request has come from Natalie in room 2 to change her primary doctor from Dr. Scott to you. When asked why, she said Dr. Scott's attitude is terrible, and he doesn't listen to her at all. Additionally, he tried to force her to use a new experimental drug. She absolutely refused, but he threatened her, saying he wouldn't treat her otherwise. What should we do? Rachel asked, looking troubled. These kinds of complaints about Stephen are endless. I see. I'll talk to Stephen about it. Even if I subtly criticized Stephen, he wouldn't listen at all. Listening to the complaints of elderly patients in shared rooms won't get you anywhere. I'm offering them a new drug out of kindness, and they have the nerve to refuse. How presumptuous of those poor people, Stephen scoffed. According to him, the problem wasn't his fault, but the envy of poor patients. I can't understand how he interprets things to reach such an overbearing conclusion. By the way, Kyle, I heard you met with the pharmaceutical company's sales representative about the experimental drug the other day. Yes. They came to collect last month's data, so I spoke with them briefly as they were leaving. Oh, you let us handle the data collection and just take the credit for yourself. Typical Kyle, Stephen sneered. Saying I only take the credit is unfair. My patients are also participating in the trial. It's natural to check the data and report the results. Well, if you say so, Stephen muttered suspiciously and left. But I didn't pay much attention to it, as it was usual for him. However, one day, I was called by Harold and accused of something outrageous. I received a notice to come to the director's office on a hot summer afternoon. When I opened the door, Harold and Stephen were there. "Kyle, I had high hopes for you, but this time you've done something unforgivable," Harold said. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, bewildered by the sudden accusation. "We already know that you have been illegally using experimental drugs and inflating data, and that you received money from the pharmaceutical company's sales representative as a cooperation fee," Stephen interjected. "What? What are you talking about? I have never done such a thing. In fact, it's Stephen who has been trying to use experimental drugs without patient consent." I protested directly to Harold, but beside him, Stephen had a twisted smile on his face. No. The clinical coordinator and the pharmaceutical sales representative have testified that you threatened them into cooperating, Kyle. I would never commit such fraud. Anyway, we have all the evidence. We don't want to make a big deal out of this. You will have to take responsibility quietly." No way. Of course, I would never engage in such misconduct. This was clearly Stephen's conspiracy and a false accusation. That's why poor people are troublesome. You committed fraud to get money, used it to curry favor, and climbed to the top. An incompetent poor person like you should just retreat to the countryside and farm, Stephen taunted. And so, I was unwillingly demoted from the university hospital to a rural clinic. News of my demotion spread quickly. "Dr. Turner, I heard about it." "This is an unbelievable injustice," said Kimberly, the head nurse of the surgical ward, angrily. However, if I openly resisted Harold, it would be terrible if Kimberly and the nurses were fired. I didn't want to cause them trouble because of me. "Thank you. I'm just happy you believe in me. Well, I think of this as an opportunity to reflect on myself in a place with fresh air," I said. "Dr. Turner." Kimberly looked sad, and the other nurses also looked at me with sorrow. On the day I left the university hospital, not only the patients but also the nurses and doctors who were not part of Stephen's faction were sad to see me go. In the car moving to the rural clinic, I quietly cried, unnoticed by anyone. My new workplace was located in a scenic spot between famous mountain ranges and upstream of a river. Although it sounds picturesque, it was a hiking area with hot springs and inns, with a population of a few hundred, less than the number of beds at the university hospital. The clinic had an old doctor named Nick and a nurse in her late 20s named Sophia. Nick had a very laid-back personality, often chatting with patients for an hour and generally lacking motivation. Sophia hardly spoke more than necessary and watched TV in the waiting room in silence, resting her chin on her hand. The patients visiting the clinic mainly had colds, stomachaches, or minor injuries, so it was very quiet. On rainy days, not a single patient came, and Nick and Sophia would have tea and snacks. The relaxed and slow atmosphere was almost unbearable for someone like me, who had been working in the fast-paced environment of a university hospital. "Are there any patients today?" When I asked Sophia, she replied with an exasperated look, "This isn't a university hospital in the city. Patience is a sign of peace. Just because you're bored doesn't mean you should wish for more patients. Besides, even if patients come, you can't treat them alone." It seemed that, as a doctor demoted from a university hospital, I was not trusted to treat patients. "Oh, staying here won't accomplish anything," I thought, deciding to leave the clinic and visit the village. "Excuse me, I'm stepping out for a bit." "All right, take care." As I left the clinic, the two of them looked at each other with resigned expressions. "Hey Nick, how long do you think Dr. Turner will last?" "I'll bet $100 on 1 month." I think 1 month is the limit too." Stepping outside the clinic, I couldn't help but exclaim at the stunning scenery in front of me. Wow, the river water really looks drinkable. The river reflected the mountains and sparkled, highlighting the blue sky. The transparency of the water, clear to the bottom, showed its cleanliness. Descending the mountain path towards the houses, the gaps between them were unusually long. The nearest house to the clinic was several miles away, making the journey a laborious task without a car. I only saw elderly people, with hardly any young people around. "Hello," I called out to the first villager. He returned a nod of surprise. "Oh, are you here for hiking? You seem lightly equipped for that." "No, I just started at the clinic here 2 days ago. My name is Kyle." "Ah, so you're the new doctor. Thank you for coming to such a remote place. But you won't stay long, will you? Doctors who come here leave soon. I've lost count of how many have come and gone." "Is that so? But I want to help everyone, so you don't need to worry. Is there anything you're struggling with?" "Well, I've had a bad back for a while now." "Back pain, huh? If you don't mind, may I take a look?" After that, I started visiting the village houses, greeting people and asking about their health. To my surprise, I found that many elderly people far from the clinic needed care, and the community was helping each other. Some clearly had illnesses, and I promised to visit them regularly. You might wonder why they don't come to the clinic despite their poor health, but for elderly people with physical ailments, walking several miles along the mountain paths is very difficult. Sometimes, family members or neighbors request house calls, but by then the symptoms are often severe. Since I technically worked at the clinic, I visited those needing treatment during the day as house calls. For others, I decided to visit their homes after clinic hours. From then on, as soon as clinic hours ended, I would head out to the village. Nick and Sophia, sipping tea, seemed puzzled that I hadn't given up yet. Odd, it's been a month since Dr. Turner came here. He seemed bored at first, but now he's strangely enthusiastic and doesn't seem like he'll quit, Sophia muttered resentfully. Nick replied with amusement, "Well, who knows? Maybe Kyle is reaching his limit. He's been fiddling with some equipment in the back room, doing side jobs. Young folks these days lack motivation. They quit as soon as they're bored. No perseverance." A villager who came to get medication for a family member overheard their conversation and chimed in. "Are you talking about Dr. Turner?" "Nick, you're mistaken. Dr. Turner visits village houses after work." "Kyle does?" "Yes, just the other day, an old man at Sean's house choked on some food. Fortunately, Dr. Turner was there and prevented it from becoming serious." "Really? People often don't come for checkups because they have trouble walking, or because the clinic is closed after they finish work. That's why your house calls are so appreciated." "I see." Nick and Sophia were surprised by what they heard from the villager. Indeed, the villagers often complained about the difficulty of reaching the clinic, but they assumed that those who didn't come weren't serious enough to visit. The next day, Nick suddenly spoke to me when I arrived at the clinic. "I heard you've been visiting village houses lately." "Yes, many people have trouble walking up to the clinic. Visiting them, I found many with untreated conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes. I thought it would be better to visit them directly than to let their conditions worsen." "You're a peculiar one." Nick turned his face away abruptly. Apparently, my visits to the villagers' houses had been discovered. I thought I might get scolded, but I wasn't told off. Since then, on days with few patients, I was allowed to leave early for house calls. One day, as I was getting used to life in the village, a rumor spread that a TV station was coming to cover this famous hiking spot. The locals were used to TV crews, having been filmed once or twice a year. Not knowing much about the TV coverage of hiking, I asked Sophia, who was familiar with the media. "TV crews can only drive up to the trailhead, right?" "Right. To film the hiking scenes, they have to carry heavy equipment." "I might try hiking myself on my next day off." When I mentioned my interest in hiking, Sophia looked me up and down and said, "Dr. Turner, don't underestimate hiking. Someone as scrawny as you can't handle it." When Sophia said that, I gave a wry smile and left the clinic to start my afternoon house calls. I had become quite accustomed to life in the village, and the peaceful flow of time no longer made me feel inexplicable anxiety. I felt I could now face people in my own way. After finishing an examination at a house at the foot of the mountain, I stepped outside to find it was raining heavily. Wow, this doesn't look like it'll stop anytime soon. I'm glad I brought my rain gear. The mountain weather can change quickly. It was sunny a moment ago, but sudden rain is common here. Downpours are frequent, and I had gotten used to the changing weather over the past 3 months. Walking around in the rain is dangerous, so I decided to head back to the clinic. As I hurried along the familiar path, I noticed it was blocked by a landslide. Could it be a landslide? If so, I need to go back and contact the police. Just then, I saw someone frantically waving their hand ahead. Please, someone help. Our group got caught in the landslide, and some of my companions are injured. What? How many people are caught? I asked in surprise. The woman, who seemed to be part of a TV crew, said there were 10 people, including herself, but she was the only one who managed to escape the landslide. Despite the poor visibility due to the rain, I could see 1 person lying at the bottom of the slope, 2 in the middle, and 6 on the other side of the landslide. I immediately contacted the ambulance, the clinic, and the police station, then ran towards the other side of the landslide with the female crew member. Upon checking the condition of the people lying there, most had bruises and external injuries, but none appeared to be in life-threatening condition. The problem was the people lying below. They likely had injuries and were losing body heat in this rain. Rescue was a race against time. Hey, is the landslide here? Tell me the situation. Nick, Sophia, paramedics, and police officers arrived on the scene one after another. I informed Nick and Sophia about the 6 people on the side and went to rescue the man at the bottom of the slope. The 2 people lying in the middle had multiple fractures in their legs, arms, and ribs, making it difficult for them to move on their own. Hey, these 2 have severe fractures. They can't move by themselves. We need stretchers. I shouted and continued toward the man further down. This man was still partly buried in the mud, with severe bruises and cuts all over his body. He had multiple external injuries and was bleeding. He was barely conscious, breathing shallowly, and needed urgent medical attention. We need help removing the mud here, and get a stretcher and a set of pneumatic tools, also an emergency kit. I called out to the paramedics and the local fire brigade. While trying to stop the bleeding and administer fluids with the tools I had on hand, I kept encouraging the man. Are you okay? Help is on the way. Hang in there. It hurts. I can't take it anymore. That's not true. If I don't make it, give this to my daughter. Inside the plastic bag he handed me, there was a photo of a blue bee taken in these mountains. The blue bee is said to bring good luck to those who see it. It's a rare bee that only lives in pristine mountains, gathering on the autumn Japanese sage, and is a species rarely seen in the country. I remembered it had recently become popular among young female hikers. He probably took the photo because his daughter asked him to. If you saw the blue bee, give her this. Tell her to be happy. He seemed to be asking me to deliver the photo and message to his daughter if something happened to him. But I wasn't going to let that happen. He would survive and give the photo to his daughter himself. You're going to give this photo to your daughter yourself. Don't worry, I'll save you. Really, can you save me? I will trust. Trust me, okay. Please hang in there. Help is almost here, with the help of the local fire brigade and paramedics. We managed to free the man from the mud, but he had an open fracture in his leg. The bleeding was severe. Just then, we received a call that the general hospital in the town, about an hour's drive away, could take him. However, transporting him would take too long, and his condition was too critical to wait 2 hours for a round trip to the hospital. That won't do, Nick said. Can I use the operating room in the back? I asked. Go ahead, but that room isn't equipped for a proper operation. I don't even know if the machines will work properly. They haven't been maintained in a while. It's fine. I've been doing some maintenance just in case. I know how to use everything. Please, let me use it. As it turns out, I had discovered an unused operating room in the back of the clinic and spent a considerable amount of time checking the machines and gradually bringing them back to working order. So that's what Kyle was doing secretly every day. If that's the case, Sophia can assist you. Until last year, Sophia was a surgical nurse at a university hospital in Tokyo. She'll do a great job. All right, Sophia, I'm counting on you. Yes, Nick and the locals will help here, she replied. Everyone said they wanted to support you, Dr. Turner, who always cares for them. So they all gathered. The local women's association includes former nurses who once worked at the district's general hospital and are now retired. They volunteer locally while also working in agriculture. If you need anything, just let us know. You can count on us, like we're a big ship, the women from the association said with reliable smiles like motherly figures. Thank you so much. Nick, who used to specialize in surgery, skillfully performed sutures while the firefighters and everyone else took care of the other injured people. Let's get started. Yes, the rest happened quickly. I began the operation on the man with the open leg fracture, working on the fracture site first, then suturing the other injuries. Normally, a procedure that would require 4 to 5 people, including an anesthesiologist, was handled by Sophia and me efficiently, finishing the operation in just over an hour. That was fast. Sophia was amazed at my work. Leaving the post-operative care to Sophia, I returned to Nick and helped with the remaining patients. Kyle, have you already finished the operation? Yes. If we had better equipment and more people, we could have done it faster, but this was the best we could do here. Faster. How short do your operations usually take? Nick was astonished at my suturing speed. By the time the ambulance from the general hospital at the foot of the mountain arrived, all the patients had been treated. The man who had surgery and those with fractures were transported to the general hospital. Just in case, those with minor injuries were accommodated in a local inn and would be examined again tomorrow before being transported to town by a minibus. Dr. Turner, your surgery was really amazing. I've never seen such efficient work, even at the university hospital. Sophia, who assisted me, explained in detail to Nick everything that happened during the surgery. After hearing her, Nick spoke to me with a serious expression. Finishing that operation in an hour while managing anesthesia and monitoring. You must have several brains. I handled many surgeries in my youth, but I couldn't do that. Even if you were called the best doctor in Japan, I wouldn't be surprised. Who exactly are you, Kyle? Nick's astonishment left me unsure how to respond. Feeling I could trust these two, I shared the story of my demotion from the university hospital. I explained how Harold and Stephen targeted me, falsely accusing me of taking bribes and manipulating experimental drug data. I was forced to take the blame and was transferred to this clinic as a result of this unjust situation. I was the head of surgery. I performed many operations and had a good reputation among patients. People came to me from all over, and I was considered a candidate for the next professor. Stephen especially resented me. With the professor selection coming up in a few years, he wanted to eliminate me beforehand. That's why he falsely accused me and got me expelled from the university hospital. What a terrible situation, Nick said, deeply shocked by my story. But now I like this clinic. I've realized that a university hospital isn't the only place to practice medicine. As long as I'm motivated, I can treat patients anywhere under any circumstances, I said confidently. But Nick slowly shook his head. No, Kyle, you're too skilled to be here. This clinic has been a refuge for young doctors who cause trouble at university hospitals. So far, we've only had real troublemakers. They threw tantrums and quit quickly, saying they couldn't work in such a remote place. But you're different. With your knowledge and skills, you shouldn't be stuck here. There are many patients who truly need your expertise. You should return to where your skills are most needed. Nick's words made sense, but I didn't want to return to where those who had framed me were. Sophia watched us with a complex expression for a moment, and a heavy silence filled the examination room. Then, someone knocked on the door. When I invited them in, it was the woman from the TV crew. "Thank you so much for saving our staff. You all saved our lives. Without you, we don't know what would have happened." The person Dr. Turner operated on is my mentor. Since I joined the TV station as a rookie, he'd has taken care of me like family. If he hadn't survived, I don't think I could have lived with the guilt of being the only one saved. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke. "I can't thank you enough. I overheard your conversation earlier. Is there anything we can do to help? Please let us assist you in any way we can." She bowed deeply. "Thank you. I just did what any doctor would, but I'm glad you feel that way. If we need help, I won't hesitate to ask. For now, please rest with the others." "Yes, thank you." I was genuinely happy that my actions had saved her and her colleagues. Up until now, no matter how many patients I treat, it was just part of the job, something expected of me. Though the landslide was an accidental occurrence. It felt incredibly fortunate that we could save many people in this place with limited equipment and staff, all working together. As I pondered this, Nick sat in the clinic, quietly sipping tea, deep in thought. Little did I know, Nick was concocting an extraordinary plan. About a month after the landslide incident, Nick told me he wanted to visit his old haunt in Tokyo and asked me to accompany him. He said he hadn't been to Tokyo for a while and needed me to guide him. I took his words at face value and went to Tokyo with Nick. To my surprise, his old haunt turned out to be the very university hospital where I used to work. Without a word, Nick barged into the director's office. There stood Harold and Stephen. With me, it felt like a cold blizzard was raging through the room. "What brings you here? How did you manage to find your way from that rural clinic without getting lost?" Harold's first words to Nick were filled with sarcasm. "Well, I had an excellent guide, Kyle, so I could get here even with my eyes closed." "Oh, you caught the dropout who made a huge blunder here and think he's excellent. You've grown, Kyle. I recommend you hurry back to the countryside before you embarrass yourself further." Confused by the sudden exchange of barbs, I watched as Nick took a bold step forward. "I'm here today to expose all the wrongdoings you two have been involved in." "What? Have you lost your mind?" Harold said. "I wondered why you called me here along with your son-in-law, but this is nonsense. Call security." "Wait, son-in-law." As I watched the exchange, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place in my mind. "Nick, are you Professor Nicholas Sullivan, the former director of this hospital and Harold's father-in-law?" "What? I never mentioned that." "No, you didn't." Recalling my previous disrespectful attitude, my face turned pale. Nick was the former director of this university hospital. What an unmotivated old doctor, I thought. But he was actually a great surgical professor. When I was younger, I had seen him a few times in the corridors, and now I could see the resemblance. The atmosphere around him had changed so much that I hadn't recognized him until now. Unlike his son-in-law Harold, Professor Sullivan, known as Nick, was famous for being a paragon of the medical profession. He was a pioneer who tried to incorporate advanced medical techniques into regional healthcare. However, his ideas were not well received at the time, and he eventually left the university. As we were causing a commotion, Harold reached for the phone to call security. Nick quickly continued. "If anyone is getting thrown out by security, it's you two. I've independently investigated the reasons for Kyle's expulsion from this hospital. It turns out that the allegations against him were entirely fabricated. This is not true. Kyle's misconduct is real. We have testimonies from the clinical coordinator and the pharmaceutical sales representative." Stephen reacted. "Those testimonies were coerced. The coordinator and the sales rep have testified that Stephen threatened them to go along with the false story. or else they wouldn't cooperate in future drug trials. Hearing this, Stephen gritted his teeth in frustration. And Harold, you knew about Stephen's misconduct and deliberately helped frame Kyle to cover it up. You have a cozy relationship with the pharmaceutical company, don't you? You were afraid that investigating Stephen would expose your own corruption. Nick now directed his words at Harold. Don't be ridiculous. You've always had an overactive imagination, but it's gotten worse with age. I don't have time for your delusions. Get back to the countryside immediately. No, it's you who will be stepping down. You've been taking large kickbacks from the pharmaceutical company in exchange for bulk orders of the new drug once it's approved. That's bribery. Your threats don't scare me, trying to pin this on me. And that's not all. The financial reports for endoscopes and other equipment don't match. Where did the difference go? I heard you sent lavish gifts to the board members to recommend Stephen for the next professorship. The source of that money can be traced, can't it? Realizing he was cornered, Harold suddenly raised his voice. Do you have proof? If these are false accusations, I'll sue you for defamation. Anticipating this response, Nick took the large bag I had been carrying for him. Really? If you want proof, here you go. Nick threw a stack of documents on the table. They included evidence of Stephen's misconduct, call records with the clinical coordinator, bank records of illegal transactions, and video footage of their secret meetings. Additionally, there were copies of contracts with the pharmaceutical company and receipts and payment slips for medical equipment purchases. Hey, Stephen, you said there wouldn't be any evidence. Harold asked, looking panicked. How is this possible? What? Stephen stammered, drenched in cold sweat, overwhelmed by the irrefutable evidence piling up before him. All of this was gathered by staff and volunteers who respect Kyle. This shows how much they admire him. And what about you two? Your reputations are terrible. You charge high fees for private rooms and look down on patients in shared rooms. There's no compassion in your treatment of patients. A hospital is supposed to be a place where people suffering from illness are helped and healed. It's a doctor's job to listen to patients, identify problems from minor symptoms, and treat them. What you wanted to do at this hospital was just make money, wasn't it? And you managed to be the director and head of surgery with such attitudes. I'm utterly disgusted. Is this what you wanted to do so badly that you had to drive me out? Nick let out a deep sigh and continued with a slightly sad expression. Do you not realize how much this hospital's reputation has fallen? Doctors should have a spirit of compassion and a desire to save people. Focusing only on personal gain is unacceptable. Have you forgotten such a basic principle? It's disgraceful. I am the current director. I don't need a lecture from you, Harold shouted back. You still don't understand very well. You will step down from this hospital, Nick said calmly. Ha, you think you can just do that? Oh, I can, just like how you removed me 10 years ago. You falsely accused me of misconduct and had the board vote on a motion against me. So I used the same method. I reported your misconduct to the board, and they've already approved it. What will you do now? What? Harold was stunned. Additionally, the board demands that Harold step down as director and Stephen be expelled. If you resist, they will formally report the misconduct to the police. They are also prepared to release the evidence to the media. We are recording everything in this room right now, so what will you do? Faced with the threat of their misdeeds being exposed to the media, the two had no choice but to admit their guilt. However, Stephen, still not satisfied, glared at me with hatred. Stephen, I know you dislike me, but why did you become a doctor? To save patients or just to bring me down? If it's the latter, did you enjoy framing me? I actually enjoyed my time in that village, the beautiful scenery, fresh air, kind residents, and gentle patients. Everyone cooperated and lived earnestly. Even after thousands of surgeries at the university hospital, I never felt this fulfilled as a doctor. I realized that the patient smiles and their words of thanks are more valuable than money. I hope you find something more important than money or status one day. Hearing my words, Stephen's shoulders slumped. Ha ha. What have I been doing all this time? I'm just a clown dancing in a castle of sand. Turning to Nick, Stephen began to speak earnestly. Grandfather, I've admired you since I was a child. You were a great doctor that everyone looked up to, and I wanted to be like you. But when I became a doctor, that image changed. You were indifferent to money, pursuing the medical care you wanted without regard for hospital management. It was my father's efforts that brought the hospital back from financial trouble. He taught me that hospital management isn't just about ideals. But deep down, I still admired you. Over time, I began to resent Kyle, who shared your values. And now, look at me. I don't know what's right or wrong anymore. Muttering to himself, Stephen said nothing more and left the director's office with his head down. Nick watched Stephen's retreating figure and let out a deep sigh. That boy is lost between two conflicting ideals. He needs time to reflect and find himself, he said with a sad smile. After that, Nick took me to a large conference room. Inside were the board members, including professors and executives. There, Nick proved my innocence, and it was decided that I would return to the university hospital. Nick replaced Harold as the hospital director and was reinstated by the board. The doctors who had supported Stephen and were involved in the misconduct were also removed by the board's decision. Harold, after being dismissed, was expelled from the university hospital. Nick then granted me the authority of acting director and said he would return to the rural clinic soon. Nick, that's not fair. I also want to return to that clinic. Oh, you like the countryside? Kyle. Then how about we start a large-scale regional healthcare project here? Really? If that's the case, I'd love to be part of it. We decided to implement a large-scale visiting medical system in rural healthcare deserts. It became a major project involving local governments. We used digital technology to operate mobile clinics in remote areas, providing regular checkups and consultations. We also converted the playground of an abandoned school into a helipad for emergency medical helicopter dispatch. Now I can greet everyone in the village easily through video calls from the city. I stay in regular contact with Sophia from the clinic. Dr. Turner, when are you coming back next? I think I can come this weekend. Great. Irene said she'll give us a lot of delicious mountain vegetables. Let's have a tempura party. Sounds good. Now I regularly travel back and forth between Tokyo and the rural clinic. One day, Sophia and I hiked up the mountain and saw a swarm of the elusive blue bees on the Japanese agate. Wow, look, Dr. Turner. Blue bees. They're so cute. You're right, they're smaller and more beautiful than in the pictures. Sophia, unusually excited, looked incredibly cute. Seeing the elusive blue bee, maybe happiness will come our way too. When I said that, Sophia blushed and smiled. I'm already very happy just having you here, Dr. Turner. That makes me happy too. Yes, indeed. This is happiness. We looked at each other and laughed. At that moment, I felt truly happy. On that rainy day, the TB crew we rescued from the landslide created a documentary titled The Miracle of the Highland Clinic. Based on their accident, they featured me as a doctor who helped cleanse the hospital and contributed to revitalizing regional healthcare. Thanks to this, I gained a reputation as an excellent doctor, and the university hospital's management improved significantly. Revitalizing regional healthcare requires money, but fortunately, we avoided going into the red. I am working hard juggling roles at both the university hospital in Tokyo and in regional healthcare. Interestingly, I feel less stressed now than when I was only working at the university hospital. I think it's because the countryside air suits me and the interactions with the villagers soothe my heart. People seek different things, whether it be status, fame, or wealth. But I want to interact with many people and help them as a doctor. It goes without saying that saving lives is important, but hearing sincere gratitude from those I've assisted makes me pleased and inspired. I wish to freely share my gratitude and feelings because of this. Expressions of thankfulness must be unreserved, else the other person will not receive them. I'll keep putting in a lot of effort to deliver healthcare that is equitable for all, regardless of where you live.